About 4 billion years of life on Earth emerged. Earth was 600 million years old at the time. Life was no more than one cell at the time and oxygen was created. 3 billion years later, life consisting of several cells emerged, and moments later the first plants were there. About 500 million years ago, an explosion of all kinds of different forms of life suddenly occurred. And 250 million years ago, the first dinosaurs were there, until they suddenly disappeared 65 million years ago because the climate was completely disturbed after a large comet struck the Earth. Meanwhile, primates were already on our planet. Their descendants are still full of monkeys, and of course humans. About 2 million years ago, the first hoinets were there. Not that the planet was full of them because there were really very few of them. I think those first hoinets had more and more desiring good contact with each other. There must have been a lot of feelings for each other for that. What we also learned in the beginning was cooking and eating. I think that through a lot of empathy we have become better and better with each other, and that nuanced speech was born from that. With that language we started working both for a good relationship between a few people and for a connection between a group of people who shared the same language, and probably much more than that. A culture, habits, justice emerged. Everything was discussed and communicated. It could be that man is a kind full of empathy and with a lot of speech. For many hundreds of thousands of years or even millions of years, we have developed our speech and empathy. But everything else, there was no question of that. We haven't even done agriculture all this time. The material we used were stones. There was no bronze yet. It could be that man was already beginning to come to a sense of sizes and surfaces. In doing so, people may have noticed that calculating the exact area or circumference of a circle is mathematically impossible. Today we multiply by the number pi, 3,14, to calculate the area or circumference of a circle. The number pi is infinite after the comma. The people of that time who had discovered the infinite in mathematics started to apply that mathematical knowledge to the starry sky, and thus one came to a universe that was infinite. People looked at the overwhelming starry sky, the moon, and the sun and believed that these things were infinite. And that's what created the thought of eternal. So there was something infinite and eternal. And here on Earth, we were able to measure distance and time. But elsewhere in the universe, everything was infinite and eternal. A universe of spheres and circular orbits will persist until Kepler and Newton calculated a few decades later that the orbits of the planets are not circular, but elliptical, and explained why. Around 10,000 BC we introduced agriculture and an explosion in the number of people was deployed. 5,000 years later in Egypt, people knew papyrus to write something down, but I don't think you could write down very complicated things with the kind of writing they had. They were more cartoons or icons to put on buildings. People were still living in the Stone Age at the time. Bronze and war. After the discovery of the bronze, a new era began. During the Bronze Age, which began around 3000 BC, tin was mainly extracted from Afghanistan. Bronze is copper with tin. There were empires like Babylonia, Syria, and Egypt back then. All these empires had bronze objects. It could be that before man began the Bronze Age, there were few wars. There was sometimes an argument, no doubt, but collectively killing an army of people and another group, that was really not for the first hoinets. There was plenty of room, there weren't many of us, and we were empathetic through and through thanks to our ability to have a chat with each other and want to understand each other. But once we started making objects out of bronze, the sword also emerged, and real armies started arming themselves, and going to war. This has caused a great deal of suffering to people. And there was trade. More and more thought and inventing. Also during the Bronze Age, people made frequent use of mathematics, among other things to build pyramid and. In addition, one has discovered the circle and the sphere, next to the corners. By seeing the shadow of our globe on the moon, it was thought that we lived on a sphere. The resurrection of islands from the sea as one approaches them also indicates a certain curvature of the Earth's surface. 360 degrees, 24 hours, 12 months, 365 days. In addition to bronze and mathematics, something was suddenly invented during the Bronze Age that I thought would become hugely important. The ABC. It was the people who lived near the Jordan who discovered something that was very practical around 1600 BC. They had short sounds simply depicted with simple symbols. If they wanted to write something down, they would just follow a sequence of those simple representations to mimic the sounds of the spoken word. This made it very easy to learn to write down a lot of different things. And the reading was even easier. By simply stringing in order all the sounds in a row, one could repeat the spoken words that had been written down. That was very practical to pass on thoughts. Ingenious. The ABC was born. Through writings that have been drawn up since then, we can get to know the way of thinking. This was a real revolution. But a lot has also been lost. There were writings that simplified long-distance trading by sea. The Phoenicians had settlements all around the Mediterranean and everywhere we find their language, but the correct content of what these traders communicated to each other has been lost. The 19th known guests are the Gathas over Zarathustra and Ahura Mazda. This is Zoroastrianism, but the writings on it are very limited. It is a few hundred years since Europeans in India have found between writings of the Avestha Gathas. These writings are older than the Bible. They go back to maybe 1500 BC when the ABC had only just emerged. They're about a vision of the universe that called itself Zoroastrianism. Ahura Mazda was the force that had created everything. They called it the goodness or the wisdom. To the infinite world it has come to be attributed that that world lies at the origin of our existence. That set the tone. So there is something infinite and eternal that has produced our existence. It has been made to be attached that this is pure goodness. This had its effect on the lives of the people here on earth. People had to make sure they behaved well. The agreement with God from the Bible is striking. This is Zoroastrianism and it's about real wisdom and good. It's about the harmony of the universe through the proper actions of man. Maybe it's a good thing, because with all that Bronze Age bronze, there might have been an arms race going on. Thanks to the invention of bronze, the production of weapons of mass destruction was probably possible. With an army of bronze weapons, you can permanently wipe entire communities of people off the face of the earth. Perhaps people were thoroughly fed up with all this violence with bronze weapons and wanted peace. Because of a great desire for a sweet person, perhaps a new human being has emerged. Everything may not have remained the same politically and wars may have been fought here and there, but it could be that the population has been spared a lot of violence thanks to a new worldview that was full of ideals and goodness. Around 1400 BC, white people of color migrated to the north of India with their worldview. Under their influence, Hinduism was further developed there, in particular with a caste system and priests who made contact with the above. The worldview containing something infinite and eternal brings Indian and Western culture together. Of course, India has had a very different philosophical development from the countries around the Persian Gulf or the Mediterranean. But the belief in something infinite and eternal that controls the universe is a constant in Indo-European history. Contact with the eternal became important in Hinduism and the priests made that contact. In the west of India, other philosophical writings came into use. The books of the Old Testament would have been written for 1,000 years. You will believe in goodness and not kill people, not lie, not steal. The Old Testament is full of these thoughts. Wisdom was at the heart of this thinking. The origin of this might be that one attributed to the infinite and eternal of their universe that one had discovered thanks to mathematics the power of goodness. That's how the goodness of the universe was born. A Persian empire was eventually founded and everything went well. There were sizes and weights, there was even a single coin. The Persian Empire grew larger and larger. Zoroastrianism was the philosophy of these Persians, and it will remain so until the Iranians convert to the Islam. Yet the Persians' memories of goodness have continued, and around the year 1000 Ferdowsi wrote about the great history of the Persians during the thousands of years before. His Book of Kings is the longest poem in the world and is a guide to how kings should rule. This poetry is still the soul of every Iranian today, and the work is imbued with goodness.